Welcome back, Red Spotters, to the show here in the Red Spotlight podcast. I'm your host, Alexis Soto, joined by Mr. David Francisco for our second installment in our two-part segment series, recapping the events of Invincible Season 1. Last time, David and I talked about the first 4 episodes of Season 1, and today we're here to recap all the things that happened in the last 4 episodes, which is quite a lot that did happen. So that's our show today here on Red Spotlight number 323. David, how are you doing this week? How's your week going so far?
Good. I finished another semester of school.
Congratulations. We're all very supportive of finishing school, especially in such a turbulent time. Yeah, this week has been strange. Not really much going on in the way of actual life, but I've been watching a lot of TV. Been watching a lot of TV, clearly, which is what we're doing here, talking about one particular TV show. And, you know, something did cross my mind when I finished watching, season 1. And don't worry, how we usually go is we're going to give our initial impressions one more time as to how we felt the show is. Today's review is actually going to go on a character-by-character basis rather than diving into all the details that happen episode by episode. It just makes for a much more fluent and free-flowing conversation. I am wondering, you did see this show on a week-to-week basis, right? I assume you saw this when it first debuted back in March?
Yeah.
Okay. And I have to wonder if this was going through your mind the entire time that the show was airing. Especially since, there were other shows that were airing at the exact same time of this same genre by a much bigger name than, with Marvel Studios. And that was the live-action Falcon and the Winter Soldier, of which we devoted so much coverage to. We talked about it every single week, as we did with the previous Marvel shows. I wonder if you thought this, and that is something that came to mind when I finished watching Season 1, and that is, man, did we dedicate the weekly coverage to the wrong show? Recap here, by the way. We really loved Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We gave it very high marks, and we found it very enjoyable on a week-to-week basis. And that did hog a lot of the conversation. Honestly, if it may be a special, badge of honor for those people who are watching this season on a week-to-week basis, because I have a sensation, the same kind of sensation that Peter has been rubbing off, and that is that this show is going to explode before we get to season 2. And I think we're in the process of it right now. So many people are going to find this in between the seasons. But it wasn't that big as it was airing. And granted, it could be because a lot of the limelight was, it's a lot of competition that happened all the way throughout. But, man, I really do wonder what it would have been like, personally speaking, to have seen this week to week. Because holy shit. And this is, I guess, the opening salvo for this discussion. I really, really liked the first half of the season. I was blown away by the second half of the season.
Yeah.
This is easily the best television of 2021. Some of the best stuff you see, the first 2 episodes are great. They're great. The last 2 episodes take your breath away.
Yes.
They take your breath away. I think I finished episode 7 and I was like, hot damn, I need a minute. I need a minute to recover from what I was seeing. And episode 7 and even episode 8 are some of those rare instances in television where your heart is racing, the suspense is building, and everything is just reaching this critical mass in ways that you weren't expecting, and yet works so very well. This is, I honestly, those episodes are among the best episodes of television I've seen. They really did reach a crescendo. And an explosion of many different proportions, of course, emotionally, and of course with actual explosions being had there. I think, and I was watching this late last night, the last 2 episodes, and the internet was down for like 20 minutes in between episodes 7 and 8, and it was eating away at me because I really wanted to press play and watch that finale immediately. It's one of these finales. It's one of these episodes, especially that whole ending, that just leaves you saying, "Wow."
Yeah.
Wow. And in a way, like, I don't think anything else that we've been talking about this year can even compare with it.
Mm-hmm.
And granted, it's been a really good year for content. It's been a really good year for shows. Like, it hasn't been slacking off. Like, we've had some great stuff that's come out in terms of shows and even in films. But this is something special. This is something truly special.
Mm-hmm.
And I am a little miffed, though, because I kind of want to see what's next now, We'll have to wait forever. I know I can read. I'm choosing not to because, like, I want to see that happen in front of my eyes with the actual show itself. But that being said, I've heard some very convincing arguments, on the opposite side, where perhaps you could get even more enjoyment out of it if you go and actually read or buy the 3 pandemonium or
compendium.
The compendiums, yes, the 15-year run of the comic series, which I believe at the moment Peter and you, David, are going through right now. But as someone who is not at all reading the comic, this is exceptional. I'm running out of adjectives to actually use here, but I think it's just about everything you can think of. That's my impression. The second half really delivered, and it even rose the first half, which was great to begin with in and of itself. That's kind of where I'm at. What about you with this last half of the season?
No, I mean, I agree with every single thing that you said, and actually, episode 7 is for sure my favorite episode of the season, and a lot of it is because everything that happened in that episode, it was not in the comic at all.
Is that so?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like this was all completely new, and like this is something that like I think you could only do this in a show, because this is like everything that happened there was built up to that moment, really. Just like from what happened in the first episode to everything, to all these little I guess like crimes that happened in the show, just like it led to all that. And it's great. Again, I think you can only do that in the show because you only have like a short window to kind of like bring everything together. And I mean, like, yeah, I agree with everything you said. This is a great show that's come out this year, and I don't know how if I would say this is the show we should have talked about instead of Falcon and Winter Soldier or something.
I don't regret certainly talking about, that show. I think we got more out of it. I think you and I come from the same place where we enjoy something, and I think our conversations make us enjoy what we're talking about even more so. So like, I don't regret the time. And what we said last week was true. If we did talk about both of these shows at the same time, those would be very long
oh my God.
shows. Like, I don't know how we would be able to have handled it, like it.
Yeah. But yeah, this show for sure amazing. I can't wait to read the rest of the comic, and I can't wait to see what Kirkman is gonna do, because especially like there's some stuff, if you didn't read the comic, there's a lot of stuff that he's already setting up that you don't even like you would even have thought about.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of setup that happens toward the last moments of the finale.
Oh, for sure.
Things that you didn't necessarily think that were going to be like upcoming, and then like, oh, that's back. Oh, this is back.
Mm-hmm.
It's, again, I think to me, what's the mark of a really well written series, and it's not, I think, transferable in every single situation, but it's in the writing. I had this discussion with Peter when we were talking about the Mitchells versus the Machines in our last episode,
Mm-hmm.
which if you have not listened to, go back. We had some great reviews on some great films that I personally am very passionate about, which is the Mitchells versus the Machines, and then also Another Round with Mads Mikkelsen, which you can currently stream on Hulu. Go watch those movies, please, because they're great, and I don't think enough is being talked about those two films.
Mm-hmm.
And also listen to our podcast, please. But he brought up a really good point when I was referring to what I appreciated so much about Mitchell versus the Machines, is that there's really little to no throwaway lines. There's some great setups that pay off toward the end, not just in terms of one-liners, but also just in terms of storytelling. And I've always said, like, what I'm really most impressed with is when the writers are, when they're able to really sprinkle in a whole bunch of, I don't know if you want to call it mentions or allusions or actual moments of character, whether it comes to the visual design or Easter eggs that you see, or just even in the details mentioned in the dialogue. I'm always so taken with when the writers are able to just seamlessly throw things in, but they don't feel thrown in. They just feel very organic, and they feel as if they were planned from the very beginning. A very detailed oriented series, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the things, well, a lot of, let's say, instances in season one where you feel like, oh, okay, that's a very villain of the week kind of thing. Only it wasn't. It's coming back,
Mm-hmm.
and you weren't expecting it to come back. And then there were even, I think what's great about the finale in general is, and one of the YouTuber reactors that I watch, Seska Says, I mean, in her reaction, put it beautifully, and that is, oh, it's the greatest hits of season one. A lot of things that they just throw out there that you didn't think would be coming, at least this soon anyway, and even in some cases at all. So it's in the writing. And in regards to what you're saying about Kirkman, clearly this is the person who created this comic and wrote this comic for 15 years, and is being given this chance to really write it again. Like, we should also mention, like, I don't know, and I don't think you know, and this may be a question to ask Kyle Lira. Kyle Lira, of course, is one of our panelists here and the creator of this podcast and the host of the Fantasy Fair podcast. But he is what I would refer to as the resident Walking Dead expert. I'm not sure how much he's into the comics, but he's the one that I think the only one of us that has stayed with the Walking Dead TV show and is up to date with it.
Wow.
But I don't know. I guess what I'm getting at is I really would like to know how involved Kirkman himself has been in the creative direction of that series, because to my knowledge, I wouldn't say not at all. I think he has made some particular, maybe he's written an episode or two, but from my recollection, I think it was some other showrunners that are very much responsible for the direction of the Walking Dead TV show, and he is involved as an executive producer. But it is my impression, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that Kirkman is much, much more hands-on with Invincible from a creative direction than Walking Dead.
Yeah, it seemed like he was almost the showrunner of Invincible. Like, that's
literally right. Yeah. He's not. I'm trying to look at the name.
But like, it's just like that's how heavily involved he was in this show. Basically, It's like, he can almost say that you can give him the showrunner role. With Walking Dead, I'm not really sure if. Yeah, I'm with you. Like, he might have written an episode or two, but like. Yeah, I feel like he wasn't that much involved in that show. But this is, again, the thing that I was saying when we were talking about Falcon and Winter Soldier. Like, use the freaking source material to really like like amp up what you're what's the word, adapting to really like bring up what you're adapting. And you know, I don't think whether Kirkman was involved or not, like, again, you gotta use the source material that you have. Don't just like, you know, you see a character and just change the name or change the power or something and be like, oh, it's my own character. Like, no, you took it from the comic, you know. And it's like, and it's just really annoying because I feel like the Marvel universe could be so much better if they just like hone in on the fact, like, no, I took this directly from this comic, from this writer, and like I just tried to like shape it in a way to really fit my movie or show and everything. Because I've been thinking about this a lot, but in Falcon and Winter Soldier, I liked Isaiah's character and what them bring him on, but like they really kind of messed him up because you know, he was a soldier who he was experimented on and thrown in jail for 30 years. And the one thing people keep asking themselves is, how did Peggy Carter not know about this? Because it's like, I mean, yeah, you can say that Hydra might have been involved or something and she just didn't know, but like, how could the founder, or like one of the founders of S.H.I.E.L.D., either Peggy Carter or Stark, Tony Stark's dad, like, how could they not know about this and do something about it? Because that's like the big questions like people keep asking and all that. And it is, and I mean, it doesn't really bother me. I can ignore it easily, but it is something to think about. And but the thing though, in the comic, the thing with Isaiah is that all that happened to him was that he was, you know, they were doing the super soldier serum, and it worked on him, but his mind was just not working. He wasn't thrown in jail or anything. He was just like, okay, you're not working anymore. Bye. Like, that's it. And I think like that way, and in that way, it's easy to kind of like just go, oh, maybe they just didn't know. Maybe his name just didn't get through the paperwork that they had to go through or something like that. It's just like, it's just so easily fixable if you just use the source material directly, you know? And so it's just, it's really annoying for Marvel to just kind of like not use any of the source material. And this is why you should. Invincible is the perfect example as to why.
Just a clarification. So the showrunner is Simon Raciopa. I'm sorry. I think I'm maybe one of the few names I can mispronounce here, but I do not know how to say his last name here. But he is the showrunner, and he wrote 2 of the episodes. So he wrote episode 7, We Need to Talk. And he also wrote episode 2. And then Kirkman wrote episode 1 and episode 8. But it very much comes across like Kirkman is the driving force here. Kind of like how, you know, we have the upcoming film In the Heights, right? And we all know that the director is not Lin-Manuel Miranda. It's John Chu. John Chu, known for films like Crazy Rich Asians. He's the director, and in films, in the world of movies, the director is the person who is the top guy around, and the one that in the name that you use to promote that project. However, Lin-Manuel Miranda, who is basically the creative force behind that film, that's the name that they're using here. And I think when you look at it on the TV side of things, Kirkman may not be the showrunner. Feels very much like he is, considering how much of a hand he's involved within. And I've heard others say how this is Kirkman wrote this comic, and here he is writing the adaptation from the comic that he wrote to the screen. And from what I hear from people who are very, very passionate about the comic, there have been some considerable improvements in terms of certain sequences that have been made longer and therefore better because of it. And then certain characters, side characters especially, who are getting an elevated role, or maybe an elevated presence, not just because of how they're depicted, but then also who is voicing them. Like the voice cast, I keep looking at the voice cast, and it's we mentioned it last week, but it's more than just Stephen Yeun and J.K. Simmons. You have Zazie Beetz, who's doing the voice for Amber. You have we talked about Andrew Rannells is playing William. Walton Goggins is doing the voice for Cecil. And it's an A-list voice cast if there ever was one. It's of course you have Mark Hamill in there. So you got to have your Mark Hamill in there somewhere. But ultimately speaking, like I've heard, and I'd like you to speak to this as well, David, that from fans longtime fans of the comic who are very impressed with how the show has been able to, in particular, elevate the presence and the roles of the side characters like Amber and Adam Eve and William and even also Debbie. So what do you make of that?
No, yeah, there were some definite improvements with a lot of these characters. With Amber especially, because her character in the comics, I mean, it was just, she's kind of...
I've heard her described, I heard that version of the character be described as naive.
Yeah, she's very naive. She has no idea what's going on at all with Invincible. Like, she's making all these assumptions and everything. But I mean, I don't know. And what I liked about her character in the comics is that they just kind of, there's always this struggle of like trying to understand each other. She just does not understand the superhero world at all. There's a moment, and I mean, I'm pretty sure they're going to take it off. They're not going to put it in the show, but like there was a moment though where she's walking outside of this house and she's looking for Invincible, but like she's looking everywhere and she doesn't like think for a second to just look up because he might be flying, and then Invincible and Adam Eve, they have this conversation, and Adam Eve is just like, see, like she's not gonna understand us at all. Like any other superhero like us would look up and actually look around for us, but no, she's not even trying. So like it's so I kind of like this thing that there's never gonna be this like connection between the two of them because of their different worlds. But I mean, I think we should just get with the character by character thing. But with Amber here, I kind of like what they did is just that, what the big thing was that she knew right away that Mark was invincible, and she tried giving him chance after chance to kind of like really take balance between superheroing and a normal life. But after a while, she was just like, nah. Like, I gave you a bunch of chances, I'm sorry, but you gotta go.
Yeah, the contrast with how I've heard that character be described with what she is in the show could not be, I guess, sharper. If that's the right word to use here. She is maybe the smartest person on the show, because she figures things out. And I have to admit, I myself underestimated her because I was rather struck when she said that she had figured things out. Oh, and that she had known a long time ago.
Yeah.
Like, I personally was caught off guard. Like, I didn't see it. The show gave you no indication whatsoever to think that she had suspected, especially since she made a big display basically calling Mark a coward for what she assumed was him running away when they were being attacked at the university, when in fact he was in costume as Invincible fighting that very creature. So that was in part, that's what kind of caused me to really be surprised by it. And in general, like, it is, and I'm not so sure if I would go so far as to say this is a particular point of criticism, but I did read this being mentioned, and maybe the passage of time in these 8 episodes maybe it isn't as clear as it could be sometimes, because we are basically talking about, it looks like, as many months as close to a year in terms of how much time has passed in the course of 8 episodes. And maybe because of that, there are some things that were not shown as much as maybe we should have, because when everyone starts to tell Mark about, you know, how the relationship between he and Amber has been like, everyone's basically saying to him that you got what you deserved. I mean, this is your fault. And when I was hearing those responses, you know, in the moment, I really couldn't quite click as to why they were being that way. And like, did they see things that I didn't see? Because it almost felt as if it came out of nowhere in that moment. And then once, I guess, their reasoning for being that harsh to him, okay, that seems perfectly understandable. The whole thing is that Amber figured it out a while back, but Mark didn't trust her enough to, you know, be open with that part of himself to her. And then he kept, you know, bailing out and flaking, and it basically kind of, you know, it comes to light that she had been waiting for him to tell her, and she was just kind of done. And so we understand that part. We did see parts of that throughout, you know, this season. But in regards to her, especially, her knowing basically almost the entire time that Mark was invincible, that was something that we personally were not privy to. And I was honestly, you know, in real time, granted, there were a lot of other things happening in those episodes, but in real time, I was a little bit, you know, caught off guard by how, I don't want to say vicious, but how blunt, particularly William and Eve were being toward Mark. Like, this is somebody who clearly feels as a, you know, he doesn't seem to understand the impact that, or the degree to which he was being not great. And especially when William said that, you know, you got dumped weeks ago, you just didn't know it. And I'm like, you know, which did piss me off a little bit, because if that were the case, why didn't you bother, I don't know, saying something if that was the truth? You know, there's this thing called communication. I don't know, it's not your place to butt into a relationship here and there, but if you see things like that, I don't know, say something about it. Because clearly Mark didn't have a clue. Yeah, your thoughts on this one? Like, particularly, I really love how strong and how she does not put up with anybody's crap and resilient Amber is. And I think Zazie Beetz brings that to life. And so on that character, I think she's a great addition to the series. In regards to this whole thing about their relationship, how did you respond to that?
Well, it's kind of a difficult thing, because this, like, the common trope of every superhero story is that they always want to keep their identity because that'll keep their loved ones safe. And I'm always in defense of that. It's like, whenever, you know, the loved one or friend like figures out their friend as a superhero, there's always that conversation of, why didn't you tell me? You should have trusted me. You should have done this. And I'm kind of like, he's just trying to protect you. Like, I don't understand. And so I do understand what you're saying, that like people were just being like super, super harsh on him, in that he didn't trust Amber. He kind of wasn't really balancing out the whole superhero thing. And that is kind of like a difficult thing for me to, I guess, comprehend, because it's like, on one hand, he's still new to this. Like, he even says it, like, I suck at this superhero thing. Like, I don't know what I'm doing, you know? And so, like, and on the one hand, them being harsh, like, it's kind of good and bad, because on the one hand, he needs to hurry up and get and get good at the superhero thing and this work-life balance. But on the other hand, they kind of need to be patient with him because, you can't rush being a superhero. Or I guess a perfect superhero.
Yeah, it personally, it made me a little bit annoyed because in successive order, his girlfriend dumped him. His best friend was unloading on him, blames him for his boyfriend basically being mauled. And then his other friend, who he goes to confide to, basically just throws more crap in his direction. And then he finds out about his father. Think about how all of those things just happened. All the fucking dominoes fell like that.
Yeah.
And my heart just went for him because oh God, this really couldn't happen at a worse possible time for you to be going through all of this. And then for the hammer to fall the way that it did. Yeah, I guess I can understand that. But I don't know. If I were Mark, I would have been a little upset. I don't know, say something here. Whatever.
Yeah.
That's just me here. But again, who am I to say anything about that? So that's with Amber, and since we're on with the side characters, let's get in with William. William especially has an interesting role to play in episode 6. That is when they all take a road trip up to, I forget what the name of it was, some university.
Yeah.
Where a crush of his attends that university, and he originally envisioned this weekend to be kind of a romantic getaway. Didn't work out that way whatsoever. Poor William. Not even in the slightest. First, it started off with Mark and Amber tagging along, and that's not obviously what he wanted. Yeah. And then they get there, and then things considerably deteriorate for a number of reasons. And it's kind of a lot to go through, William is an interesting character, he is very he's strong. He's a strong personality. He's brutally honest with his opinions, and he makes them known very, very clearly. At the same time, he is a good person. He is ultimately somebody who we've seen react in ways that are indicative of kind of the hero life in a way. When all of the things are going down, he jumps into action. So does Amber, we should mention, to help, clear people out of the way when the monsters start attacking. And then even himself, once he's freed from his binds, in the climax of episode 6, he even starts to it's because of William that I think what's his boyfriend's name, Rick. He ends up help turning the tide, and he helps Invincible. And then once William is free from his binds, then he kicks the ass out of I forget the name of that prick.
Evil scientist guy.
Yeah, evil scientist guy. Yeah, he kicks his ass, and all of that and more. Yeah, but he also can be it can be a bit of what's the right word to say here? Yes.
I'm just trying to think what you're trying to say. He's kind of a lot.
Yes, that's the best way of saying it. He's kind of a lot, and it's a very interesting. He's a very different personality than Mark's. They have very two different wavelengths, and it's an interesting pair up to see them being best friends. What did you think of William here?
I actually really liked them.
Yeah.
Again, a bit of differences in the comic. It just seems like they just kind of they don't have the different energy like you just pointed out. In the comics, they seem like almost the same person and everything.
Oh, okay.
He's just more of that generic friend who's like, my best friend's a superhero. Woo,
so Ned from Spider-Man.
Yeah, Ned from Spider-Man, basically. Yeah, that's kind of him. But I really like what they did in the show, where they showed him to be a bit of a hero himself, or like potential hero for him too. I like how he stood up with the robots and just kind of protect people that he cares about. The one thing I really like, though, I can't remember how he figured out Mark's identity in the comics, but it wasn't like in the show. And I really like how they did it, where he's just like looking at him for like a few seconds and he just goes, Mark?
Yeah.
It's just like it kind of got this is kind of like the trope of superheroes, like you're like a friend of theirs is staring at them right in the face, but they can't figure out that it's them. But with the Invincible, though, like they throw that away. It's like, no, he'll figure it out. Of course, this is his friend. And then just like after he figures out his Mark's identity, like, you know, it goes back a bit of the comics, like when he asks him to fly and everything. That happens quite a lot in the comics. But yeah, it's just, I mean, again, it's just like I said last time, like there was just these like little tiny changes from the comics that just makes the whole thing so much better. And with this one, it's him being kind of heroic in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great.
Oh yeah. While we're on that, in terms of the events that happen in episode 6, you know, we talk about how the gore, a lot of the gore that happens in these episodes are, they can end up being stomach churning, honestly, even if it's an animation. But in regards to what happened to Rick, and then also some of the other kids at that university, that's just messed up.
Oh my god, for sure.
That's just messed up.
Again, with this show, they do a good job of like introducing a character and just making you care about them right away. Mm-hmm. And so with Rick, especially, like you right away care about Rick's and what's the friend's name? William's relationship, and then that moment where William's like trying to talk to him, trying to talk to Rick while he's being like mind controlled, you know. Again, and it's like that's the superhero trope that happens all the time. Mm-hmm. But with this one, though, it is kind of like, it is very suspenseful in that moment. And it's kind of like, you don't,
heartbreaking too,
and heartbreaking, yeah. And especially like what they did with the animation, where he's like looking at him and like finally says William's name. Rick says William's name and everything, but like his voice is all fucked up, and it's just, yeah, it's heartbreaking, but also kind of like, oh, kind of emotional.
Right. Yeah. And then I knew when Cecil looked at those designs that was going to come back, but I didn't think it would come back so soon. I think literally the next episode they come back, and I was like, whoa, you guys really went to work on that, like, immediately.
Yeah. No, it was so good. Especially because, like, so the ending of Evil Scientist, he gets punched in the face by Mark, and like,
oh, his jaw is beautifully broken. That was great.
That was intense. But then the next time you see him, he's just got like this neck brace on him, and he's just like, he can't talk. But like his reactions to whenever Cecil is like talking about him, but like just saying the meanest stuff. Like he just keeps keeps talking about how much of a piece of shit he is, and the guy's just kind of like taking it like, oh, and it's great. But yeah, that was. The way they came back, though, it's a huge surprise, and again, great payoff, honestly.
Yeah, and we should also mention, of course, the reason. I mean, if you saw the episode, why Cecil was so taken with at least those the designs of these monstrosities, is because he's fucking desperate to find anything and everything he can to stop the Viltrumite, like Omni-Man, and they went toe-to-toe with Mark. But it's also pretty dark in the first encounter where he fucking just killed himself. After he got to look at himself in the reflection pool. That was, some dark moments. Like, honestly, some of the darkest moments I've seen in any superhero genre anything.
That kind of happened in Daredevil, remember? The first season.
I know what you're talking to is, what's his name? I don't remember the name of it, but it did happen to... Yes, it did happen there. Somebody stabbed his eye through, right?
Yeah, because I guess he got...
Of Wilson Fisk?
Yeah, this guy working for Wilson Fisk got caught by Daredevil, and he was just like, I can't say anything. I can't tell you anything. Or like, this is my only option now, and like, kills himself. So like, yeah, that also... you just like reminded me of it when you said that. I'm like, oh, wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no. Either way, though, I think I think in Invincible it is more gruesome because that one's more of like a shock. Because in Daredevil it's more of a shock value of a fear thing, whereas this one is just like this dude straight up did not like what he saw. He thought of himself as a monster and decided to end it. So it's like it's way more gruesome for sure.
All right, now let's go to Adam Eve. She has a really interesting turn. So we discussed last time how, she started off the series with a member of the, what are they called? I keep calling them the Teen Titans.
Team,
I just keep the Teen Team. Sure, it's the Teen fucking Titans. We all know what it is. It's all ripping off DC, but and I have to think that at first she was interested in being a member of the new Guardians of the Globe, but then after the whole fallout with Rex, she kind of just went her own way, and she kind of wasn't sure about what she should do next. And so I actually thought it was something new in terms of what they did with her, and that is, well, I'm a superhero, and maybe I can do, instead of like just, being in like these badass fights all the time, maybe I can use my powers to actually help people where they need it the most. She basically goes out and makes herself a treehouse that looks a lot like the treehouse the Wookiees used in the Star Wars Holiday Special. I don't know if that caught your eye, but it seemed very similar there. But it's a cool treehouse. I'd love to visit it. But she uses her powers to make rain and for the crops to grow and to help people on her way. And it all feels very satisfying. You can tell that she's very much finding a place of fulfillment. And she's a very, very mature character for somebody who is basically not even done with high school yet. Or I guess she decided to leave at that point. But it's a very interesting direction to go with her, at least for this half of the season. I have to ask you, what did you make of that? Do you think that's going to continue into season 2, or do you feel like she's going to have to be brought in more into the fold with the mounting threats that are popping up around the world now?
I'm not sure. I really have no idea what they're going to do with her character next. As far as I'm left off with the comics, like she's still just staying in her treehouse, changing the world in all types of ways. But I don't know why. It might be just because of the show, but like I feel like there's gonna be some major consequences from what she's doing. Cause like, I don't know, just like manipulating anything you want with like the thought of your mind, there's gotta be consequences to that, Cause like without even thinking,
yeah, you wouldn't think there would be, but like I got that feeling too. It's like, how long can this last without something horrible really happening? Some unintended consequences here.
Yeah, so like it's kind of scary to think about. But in terms of like what she kind of went through, I honestly loved it. Like this is something completely different that I've seen before. And I liked how she went about it with talking about it with Mark, going like, "Do you think this is something I should do?" And he's like, "Yeah, do it. Like you're still saving the world. You're still being a superhero with or without punching people. Like." And I really don't see a problem with this. So I kind of like that she's just the type of hero that just kind of thinks that she can do so much more than just punch bad guys.
Yeah. So that's Mark's friends. Where do you want to go to next? Which character? Shall we go to Debbie?
Who's Debbie?
His wife. Omni-Man's wife,
Mark's wife. Sorry. Okay, yeah, Debbie. Oh, yeah.
No.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So her, I really like what they did with her character here. And in the comics, she did not investigate the murders. Yeah,
really?
It was just a complete surprise. The big reveal. So
is it fair to say that she has an expanded role here in the show?
For sure, much more. This one, in the comics again, she was a stay-at-home mom, but with this one now, she has a work. She has a job. She has a bit of a life of her own and everything. And I like that they show her like she's able to stand up to her husband, even though he's the most powerful person in the world. And we talked about it last week. He's not a good guy. Like he can be very manipulative and everything.
Well, we'll get to him. We're saving some stuff for him. I mean, yeah, they were these. Yeah, we'll get to him in a minute here. No, but you're so right about Debbie. I think what I really do enjoy about her is also the kind of strong character she is in her own right. I love the storyline where she was, basically putting all the pieces together. Just the moments where she begins to understand and she realizes they're honestly among the more heartbreaking moments because they're quiet moments. They're not visually gruesome as other materials are like in the series, but it also, your heart just goes for her every single time. She gets to a point, where she finds the suit, she sees the blood, and then she begins to act very coldly and unlike herself, and then you realize that she's been investigating on her own. She goes and visits Omni-Man's tailor, and then he basically, based on his examinations of the suit, confirms their worst fears. And then shit all hits the fan. And it even gets worse. Well, actually, before that, there were one of my favorite scenes with her is in episode 5, which we'll get back to. Don't worry, that was a great episode in its own right. But in episode 5, where Mark is having this kind of dilemma in whether or not to assist a criminal, and to take out a bigger criminal, and Mark ultimately feels that he's a good guy and that he's somebody that's worth helping. And it's I think one of the best scenes where Nolan, his father, is just being very, like, maybe very is a bit light, just aggressively dismissive of Mark even entertaining like the idea of helping somebody else out. Just in trying to basically talk Mark out of even doing something like this. Whereas Debbie, and you can tell that I love how the scene is framed, because she, she's in the middle or seated in between Nolan and Mark. And the entire time you can tell she seems as if she's just spaced out or tuned out, and she's, going through that turmoil because she's right in the middle of finding out who her husband really is. And again, this conversation that's being had surrounding her only makes her realize this even more so. And I love just the subtle digs she has in there when Mark asks her about what she thinks of the situation. And she basically at some point says a line where it's like, sometimes people aren't who they appear to be, while looking directly at Nolan. And then she redirects her position to Mark and says to him that if basically saying that nothing or no one is beneath helping them, or something. I think I butchered that line, but I think it was a beautifully delivered moment. And I love the subtle shade of it all in that moment, obviously directed toward Nolan there. And that was a great for Sandra Oh, really committing all to the character. But when we get to the moments where she's with Cecil at the headquarters, and they're listening in to the conversation that Nolan and Mark are having, especially when basically Mask Off, when Nolan reveals who he really is, and the things that he says about his wife, his supposed love, like calls her a pet. Mark asks his father at one point during this exchange, while Omni-Man is saying, like, these people, they're meaningless. Their lives don't matter. And then Mark really asks Nolan at some point, are you saying that Mom's life is worth nothing? And then maybe he hesitates for a second or two. And he's like, yeah. All the while, of course, Debbie is listening back to this at headquarters, and just, God, the hits this woman takes. And then all to the last scene that she has in the season where, she's alone in her bedroom. And I think that's the moment where it really, really hits, where she's all alone and she's lost the person that she's loved for her life. And then the full realization that it was a complete and utter lie. And then that scene where Mark is, looking through the door and she's just breaking down. It's gut-wrenching, honestly.
It's so sad, but it's so good.
It's so, yeah.
It just, in terms of the way it was animated and everything, like, it feels awkward. It feels so fucking sad. And you feel for Mark, like, what the heck can he say in this situation? What the heck can he do? And when his friends come over and they're all like, oh my gosh, dude, like, are you okay? And everything, they ask him that. And he's just like, I need to get out. Like, let's just go somewhere, please. And then for her though too, I mean, again, what I love about the show is just that all of these characters, like, they have their own individuality, and with her though, I loved it that, like, she stands up to Omni-Man, like, at every single chance, like, without fear and everything. And and then just in this moment when she breaks down, you're just like, oh God. And
it's go ahead.
Well, it's just like tiny spoilers from the comics. It gets hard for her. Like, it just, oh my God.
I imagine.
Yeah. But I'm sure you could have guessed it. But I'm very curious what they're gonna do second season. But I mean, obviously, like, the point when she bounces back from that, I'm not spoiling anything from the comics. I'm not there yet, but, like, obviously, she might bounce back from this, and I just can't wait to see what they do.
Yeah. I'm very curious to see where she goes next, because the question has to, come to your mind. How do you come back from this? How? Like, what do you do? I mean, beyond what do you even say to her, but what do you do? It's a complicated question to even get into. Before we get into, our big players with Mark and Nolan here, let's get into some of the other side characters, some of the other side storylines that happen here. So we talked about last week about Robot, and you said that particular storylines, it heads into a place that you just didn't see coming. Yeah, I didn't see any of that coming. It's fucking weird. I have to say, I wasn't expecting that. It's really weird.
It's so weird, but at the same time, it was kind of like a beautiful moment for me.
Yeah, it's kind of sweet. I mean, it is kind of sweet, like the whole intention behind of what he was doing. It's because like the way that it first is teased, you know, robot being the reason for why, you know, the what are they called, the
something brothers, I don't know.
Yeah, those brothers are being released from prison. Like, robot's the reason for why they get out. And then you see him ominously bowing down to like this creature in a pod, and like it all seems very ominous. Like, okay, this can't possibly be going in a great direction here. One of my theories was maybe like this is something that he's doing because he's figured out that Nolan killed the Guardians of the Globe, and he's creating a weapon formulated through people's DNA. That didn't pan out clearly. And so what happens here is, and you see at first how very involved he is with Monster Girl, you know? And in certain characters point this out about how uncharacteristic it is for, you know, an android such as him to, you know, appear to be so human and be so driven. But then in lies the twist. Well, he really isn't an android. He is basically a person. Like, the robots were basically being remote controlled through his human self, which was in this pod. And the realization then becomes is this is a chance for him to basically be born again. And the drive for this seems to be the connection that has sparked between himself and Monster Girl. And personally, that was really surprising. That wasn't something that I thought was even in the cards.
No, yeah, that was a huge surprise for me, and the turning point that just kind of like got me invested is when I think like the brothers ask him like, "Why are you doing all of this?" You know, it's like, what's the point? And he goes, "I met someone," and I'm like, he's like, "Hey, he wants to be a real boy," and
yeah,
and all that. And then when you finally get to the part where they're cloning him, they're gonna transfer his memories to the new body.
The clone. Yeah.
And I kind of like their explanation of it. It's like, you do know though that like we're not transferring like your whole consciousness into this body. Like, no, we're just making a copy of it. You know, you're not gonna know which part of you is gonna wake up on. And then when his new version wakes up and sees his old version, you know, again, it's like, it's so sad, kind of weird, but also just kind of beautiful though. It's like they're talking to each other. It's like, I'm glad it was you. And he kind of like kills himself, but he goes out peacefully in a way.
I think those are the perfect words to use right there, David. It was sad, it was beautiful, and it was weird. and somehow it all worked together. Like, all of it really worked. Like, just the connection, or just, you know, I guess something, just the beauty and the peace of it. You know, the birth of a new life, and then also even the twins. I don't call them the twins, but the brothers were having an emotional moment as well, because they themselves are clones and they feel somehow connected in all of this. It was just an interesting sequence, and it was so surprisingly emotional for something that seemingly came out of nowhere.
Even the brothers got emotional too. Like, one of them had to like wipe a tear away. It was great.
Yeah,
and you kind of get like a little. I mean, he gets a little payoff from it. So like, he's in his new body. He meets the Guardians at their base and everything, and he's just like, "Hey guys, what's going on?" And I was just like, "You took Rex's DNA and you just took his body, I guess, or like, and all that." And he's just like, "Yeah, what's the problem?" Like, I thought that was so funny. It's like, he truly doesn't understand like how big of a deal this is, and how could you not have thought of this,
He really just crossed so many boundaries.
Oh, for sure.
He violated so many boundaries. Like, holy crap. Like, when I realized, like, what the clone looked like, I'm like, oh no. This looks exactly like, this isn't going to go over well. This is going to be fucking awkward. And then we see the meeting that you're describing, and then it is. It is very awkward.
But then again, like, kind of a payoff though is that so they're seeing the footage of Omni-Man being trying to stop him before he gets to Mark and everything. No, was it that part or was it no think about it, was when he was beating the shit out of Mark. And at one point Monster Girl just like kind of holds his hand and everything, and it's like again it's weird, but you're also kind of like, ooh, this is the start of something right here that could be cool.
Yeah. And all the while, of course, one of the storylines throughout the season, the Guardians themselves, these new Guardians, we needed to see them become a unit, to become an actual team. It is this cluster of personalities that are not necessarily compatible, at least on paper. And they definitely clashed most of the times that we saw them on screen. But you can definitely tell that this particular moment, this particular day, helped unite them finally, which is what they've been waiting for. Basically, it took them a whole year. It seems like these 8 episodes took about a year in the timeline of the show. So that was also nice to see. For the new Guardians of the Globe here. But then also, that's not necessarily where the cloning storyline ends. Something also comes out of left field. Again, just what makes this so enjoyable to see is how they continue to surprise you, honestly. And so when we cut back to the brothers, I was like, wait, why are we coming back to them? And then we see who they've got laying on their contraption. And it's, what's the Immortal one? Is that what it's called? Or
the Immortal, I think.
The Immortal. Oh God. Okay, so that explains, one of they were seen at a grave site somewhere, and they got the body and they basically stitched it back together, and then like, oh fuck, and you see it coming immediately, so they bring him back, which is an amazing sequence to see. And then he just literally wastes no time. He wakes up pissed off, like out for blood, like, where the fuck is Omni-Man? I'm going to go kill him. And then he literally just flies out of there as fast as he can. And then heads all the way. And I love just like the anticipation toward that, because, at headquarters, Cecil and his team, they're monitoring the fight between the kaiju, and then Mark and Omni-Man are all there. And then they see an object on the radar about to approach the site. And then Cecil asks, is that Adam Eve? And then like, no. And then he gives this look, and then just, it's the most random thing. He just comes out of the grave and starts beating the shit out of Omni-Man, and it's awesome. Yes. Honestly, it was also hilarious. Like, oh my God, who would have seen that coming?
I know. And like, it's funny though. It's like, you probably should have seen it coming, because why else would you name yourself the Immortal? Yeah. But no, yeah, that's I love that scene, because yeah, you're right. That rage that just builds up inside him. I also like though when they brought him back to life, you see his memories, and if you caught it, he's Abraham Lincoln. Basically, yeah. I was like, are they doing here what I think they're doing here? Yeah. And I guess that's what they did. Yeah. Yeah, that was funny, especially when I saw that in the comics. I first found out about that in the comics. And like, I saw a picture of him, like he's wearing the top hat and everything, and I was like, "Wait, what?" And I turned the page, and it's like a close up of his face, and I'm like, "Oh my God, he is Abraham Lincoln! What the hell?" Yeah. Like, how did I even notice? Like, he's clearly got the facial features. I mean, what clearly threw me off was just the giant fucking body that he has.
Oh yeah.
But no, it's actually like a really cool thing that they did, just bringing him back to life. And like, you kind of clearly the Immortal is like, technically Omni-Man is the Superman of this world, but like the Immortal is the Superman, I guess, of the Guardians of the Globe. So it's like, it was really cool that seeing them two like head to head and everything.
Maybe a better way to compare it is the Immortal is the Superman from the animated series universe, the Superman animated series, the Justice League animated series, and then Omni-Man is the Superman from Zack Snyder's movies.
Yeah, that's what it is.
That's the best way to compare it. I mean, Superman in the Zack Snyder films is not outwardly a bad guy or evil, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
He loves his murder. And so we see that occur, and then it's just a complete onslaught. Like, they're wailing into each other. You can definitely feel Nolan's surprise. It's like, damn, that this decision to kill them really came back to haunt you in the worst way possible, didn't it? Like, only, of course, in a really terrifying way, it wasn't nearly enough. And this came off the heels of Cecil throwing everything in the kitchen sink. And again, it just didn't. It wasn't nearly enough to stop him. And in the moment that basically kind of revealed his true colors to the whole world, because the news cameras are capturing these images, he, shoves his fist all the way through his torso, basically killing him, with blood splattering all over the place. And you see, in the next couple of frames, all the people of the world react in real time to just the horror of it. And then he rips him in half quite easily. And then we pan to, one of the licks that the Immortal got in there. He really gouged Omni-Man's eyes bad.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Yeah.
I have to say, I'm not usually a fan of gore. Like, I mean, I appreciate it. I respect it when it's warranted. But usually when it's, like, used in excess, I'm not so crazy about it.
Mm-hmm.
But it is used to such an effective way here. Like, it's never, I feel, grotesque in the way that, they're really relying on this and it's, like, really overblown. No, all of the gory moments that you see serve a story purpose to it. It never feels overused, even though you're seeing a lot of it, especially in these last couple of episodes.
Especially
but when those eyes are, oh my, whoa. Yeah, that's something. And then he snaps him in half, and then you see you pan to Mark's confusion, and I love how that episode ends. We're like, yeah, Mark, we need to talk here. Yeah, you think? So that was interesting. Before we head off into the big moments, between Mark and with Nolan, just to cover our bases with some other characters, I should have recognized almost immediately who it was. But remind me, what is the name of the character that we see in episode 5? There's actually a big episode where Mark is choosing to help him. He's basically a lackey of some sort, or a villain for hire for Mega Head Man. Is that who it is, or Mega Man? I don't know who that villain is, but he helps him kind of overthrow him, and then through the course of what seems to be a betrayal, that character ends up on top as the new, basically, kingpin, quote unquote, of that particular district. I think the actor that voices him is Mahershala Ali, 2-time Academy Award winning actor Mahershala Ali, who also played Cottonmouth in the Luke Cage Netflix series. And also Uncle Aaron in the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse series. Like the roles this actor has amassed in a couple of years is pretty legendary, and you can add this to him. It was a great addition, great presence. Do you know the name of this character and what your feelings overall were about this storyline here?
I can't remember his character name. But I
can look it up.
But I really liked his character, especially in this one. I don't think they showed of like his family in the comics. I think it was just oh no! In the comics, like his sort of lead up to this moment is that at one point Mark fights him, he beats him up, and everything, and he just kind of gets taken away. Later on, though, there's this alien invasion that happens on Earth, and Mark sees him and he's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he's just like, "Oh, I'm just like I think he was gonna rob something," but Mark just kind of goes, "Stop it! Just help us out here. Come on, man. We just got invaded," and everything. He's just like, "Yeah, all right." And so that kind of like that was almost like the seeds, I guess, that planted him to be a good guy, or at least we thought to be a good guy, and that's why Mark helps him later on. It's like, yeah, I mean, you did this one good thing. Like, I'll help you out here. That's how
his name is Titan.
Titan, okay. But yeah, that's how it was in the comics. But with this one though, I like what they did. It was just like,
oh, and the guy was not Mega Head Man. I don't know what the fuck was wrong with me. Machine Man, Machine Head. Sorry.
Oh my God, I love what they did with this character, because in the comics, I did not think of his voice at all. It was just kind of like I just thought of it really robotic.
Oh, that voice.
But with this one, I love what they did to it. It was just like he auto-tuned his voice all the time, but he's actually singing. Oh, it's great. That's such a great thing. But yeah, Titan. I like what they did to this. They added more depth, I guess, into his character and all that. And they added more of a reason to become a kingpin, whereas with in the comics, he just wanted power. That's basically it. So, and he does come back later on. I heard he comes back later on. It's not much of a spoiler. But yeah, I like again, tiny changes to everything in this story, and they're great. They're so great. But I love that episode though, because it got violent towards the end, especially against
God. Oh my God. Ooh. Like, not only was like Mark beaten up badly, but so were some of the Guardians.
Oh my God, for sure. Especially, I don't know what the character was, but one of the Guardians of the Globe was like, I like how he was kind of a bit protective of Mark, like when Invincible basically, like, I don't know, loses his guts, I guess. And one of the Guardians was just like, Invincible, and like tries to beat up that tiger looking alien.
Battle Beast, I think his name is, right?
Battle Beast.
Battle Beast, which I hear, right? That's the name, right? Battle Beast?
Yeah, I think so.
I hear that he is a bigger player, or will be a bigger player in future installments of the show. Like he has he's a reputable character from the comics.
Yeah, I heard that too.
Have you gotten there yet, or no?
No, but I mean, I can from the ending of the first season, like he's clearly got to come back. So I'm sure he'll probably come back too in the comics and all that.
By the way, I don't know if you knew this, but we're talking about Rick, right? William's love interest. He was played by Jonathan Groff.
No fucking way.
Yeah. You'll be back, Jonathan Groff.
Dang, that's awesome. Wow, man, this cast.
I'm just looking at the voice cast. So D.A. Sinclair, who was the mad scientist guy who did that to Rick. Ezra Miller.
Oh, no fucking way.
Yes. Like, imagine this. Like, this is a smorgasbord of these amazing actors just doing this great voice work. Like, wow.
Mm-hmm. This is an awesome cast. Wow. But yeah, that episode, holy shit. And honestly, like the crazy part for me is like when Mark gets like his guts get open, you see Omni-Man on top, and you're like, oh my gosh, he's just been watching this entire time, and it's like,
and he does nothing.
He does not, and I'm kind of curious, like, is it to teach him a lesson, or to test his strength, or is it what is it? Or did he want like these Guardians? Because we find out in episode 8 that he killed the Guardians because he needed to dismantle the security of this world, basically. And so like they do.
And we're never given an answer to that question.
Mm-hmm.
That's never really addressed, because basically like the hammer drops and all these other revelations come to light that doesn't seem to be the case. No one ever seems to find out that the entire time Omni-Man was looking above and could have prevented this.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't much matter anymore, because obviously the mask came off and all these things happened thereafter. But I was wondering that myself. Like, what was the point? Was he trying to test how strong he is, really? Well, but like that was just yet another indication about what a complete lack of compassion this person has. I mean, his own son was basically dying, and he just flew there and did nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fucked up. I'm sure. I mean, like I said, everything that's been set up here has been a great payoff. So I'm sure that's probably gonna come back at some point. Who knows? I hope it does. That'd be cool. But yeah, no, I mean, like I said, Titan, cool character. I really like what they did with him, and awesome episode.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how much more we can avoid it, but let's get into Mark and Nolan. Before we get into the big confrontation, Mark is at a very interesting place. In terms of like what happens, he goes through a lot these last 4 episodes, kind of in contrast with the first 4 episodes where he's very much all about the superhero life and just can't get enough of it. And there is kind of a turn here, throughout the course of like, especially with like the pretty traumatizing experience that he goes through, basically almost being killed, with that confrontation that we just spoke of, at the tower. And he doesn't say it outwardly until the very end, but there is some kind of a conflict within him that you can feel, and that is, does he really want to do this? And it's at a moment where, especially since he decides to take that trip with William and with Amber, and he kind of falls in love with the whole scene, the college life basically, and he starts to picture himself about how his life would look like if he attended that place with Amber, and he starts to, really fall in love with that idea. And then also he just is unsure ultimately in general if this superhero thing is even for him. And so it is kind of a big turn that we see. And then unfortunately there really isn't much time for him to process that, because the worst thing that could possibly happen happens, and that is his father is basically this traitor, this murderous traitor that he has no choice but to stand up to. And in the aftermath of what happens, especially with what Cecil says, like, you're kind of our only hope here. Like basically saying you don't have much of a choice here. And you're not entirely sure if Mark has made up his mind entirely about what he wants to do at the end, but he makes it very clear he'll always help. He'll always help when they need him to. But in the closing moments, and I think it was a great way to close out the season, he kind of brings things back down to earth, literally, as they say. But when he's talking to that alien who is voiced by Seth Rogen, who, by the way, is a executive producer of the series. I wasn't aware of that. He is... we saw him earlier. Alan the Alien. He's an He's an assessor of member world candidates for the Coalition of Planets, whose homeworld was conquered by the Viltrumites, which we come to know in the finale here. And in the final conversation that he has with Mark, he asks to Mark, "All right, so what are you gonna do?" And then, Mark responds, "Well, I'm gonna finish high school." And then cut to black, and kind of brings it back into really like kind of ground level for Mark here. And so yeah, it's the dust is settling. He's not quite sure yet, and that's okay. But he goes through a lot,
Mhm.
Mark.
No, yeah, and I like that conversation that he had with the alien, where he tells him like, dude, it's like there's this giant war going on with the Viltrumites, like they're taking over the galaxy and blah blah blah, and Mark just kind of goes, "Wow, this is like bigger than I thought," and it kind of gives him comfort because it's like, okay, so this isn't. This is like literally the worst day of his life, probably, but it's not the worst case scenario in a way. And I think it's kind of cool that he kind of like tries to take a positive spin on his whole situation and everything.
Yeah, it means he's not alone.
Yeah, he's not alone. There's so much more going on, and all he can do, really, obviously he'll want to put 100% into saving people, saving the world when it's needed. But the only thing that he can just focus on right now is just finishing high school.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's all he can do, and I think that's kind of cool. It's like he wants to tackle all these things, but he just can't. But now he has something set in mind, and that's high school.
Well, let's go ahead and get into this big thing. So, the real climax of this season, kind of where we all knew it was going to be heading to, this confrontation between Nolan and Mark, where Nolan reveals who he really is, and I guess I had kind of guessed this is the route they would go with. Because we know in the pilot that they had talked about, or they had revealed, quote unquote, where Omni-Man comes from, and something about that wasn't complete. And so we're kind of reevaluating what that is, and it turns out that these Viltrumites, they're basically the First Order.
Mm-hmm.
They're basically Nazis.
They're the First Order / Super Saiyans. Or Saiyans. From Dragon Ball Z,
Right.
basically.
Oh, yeah, that's right. The Saiyans.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The Saiyans, yeah, they weren't good, huh?
No, they weren't.
Oh, no, they weren't. Yeah. It's just remembering what they were. Yeah, they basically, maybe that's the best way. They're the Saiyans. The Saiyan race from the Dragon Ball universe, where they're this species of warriors. And that's kind of what they live, breathe, and do. And their whole lives is basically to make each other stronger and then to inflict their will upon the galaxy. Mm-hmm. And that's basically what the Viltrumites do. But then you see kind of the horrendous details that are shared, through Nolan, where he says that, oh yeah, we just decided to kill the weakest among us so we could all be strong. And now we're gonna fly to all parts of the galaxy to be benevolent, or what, or their interpretation of benevolence.
Mm-hmm.
But you see through that whole explanation, okay, all of it kind of all clicks together. So this is Nolan on a mission to just enslave humanity,
mm-hmm.
and to become a part of the Viltrumite Empire. But then in his explanation, you just also begin to understand that while this race may have become infinitely more powerful in terms of brute strength and also in terms of advanced technology, what they lost is a great cost. They lost all sense of compassion, of empathy, any semblance of humanity was completely removed from what they are now. And then you begin to see Nolan has no understanding of these concepts. Mm-hmm. And that is why they're met with such resistance to him. That is why he just scoffs at so much, which is why he doesn't ultimately understand life on Earth and how it could possibly be appealing. He looks at people and he only defines them by how strong they are. And if they aren't, which is what he considers most, if not all, Earthlings to be weak creatures that you can step on, he considers their existence to be worthless. And so in his eyes, that'd be one thing. But it takes it a step further by saying, like, it doesn't matter if I maul them, if I kill them without any kind of thought or consequence. It doesn't matter because they don't matter. Mm-hmm. There's no reason for me to care about them. They're weaklings. They mean nothing. The person who supposedly he loves, the person who he made a baby with, he calls a pet. Mm-hmm. Nowhere near an equal, but a pet. And it's one thing for him to say this, and then it's another thing for him to show this. And when he shows Mark who he is, it is some of the most harrowing collection of images you'll ever see on television, you'll ever see in this genre of storytelling. He really goes above and beyond, I'll say, that Omni-Man, to show how monstrous he can be with how brutal he is. It all just starts with, and I had a bad feeling when Mark saved one of those pilots from falling to the ground. I had a bad feeling in my stomach. And then, without even looking or thinking that much, Omni-Man's there. Oh, and he just squeezes his head, and it all kind of explodes, and there's like brain soup all over Mark. Just like that. Mm-hmm. That's how it starts. That's how it starts. And then he basically throws Mark to the closest the nearest metropolitan area, and in this case happens to be Chicago. And we cut to a normal day in the city. Cars, traffic, people getting ice cream, people just walking by. And you think in that instance when you're seeing this sequence, like, oh no, this is going to be bad. Mm-hmm. This is just going to be bad. And just the mere crashing of Mark into the downtown area levels so much of that space. Buildings collapse, and he's trying to hold one of them up at the same time, trying to help this mom and her daughter get out of that situation, trying to hold them, but he can't. And the building collapses, and not just them, but then anybody else who happens to be in that building, anybody who happens to be below on the streets. And some of these images you just can't get out of your head. When the woman who he was holding on to, all that's left of her is the arm. The rest of her is just gone. Mm-hmm. And we can get into detail, as we will right now, as to all of the images that we will see thereafter. But I don't think, and please, I hope people listening do not take this the wrong way, and in me being insensitive about it. But the destruction that we see happen in this city just feels like 9/11. Like in terms of the sheer cataclysm, the sheer loss of life, the destruction, not just in those buildings coming down, but in what transpires underneath the city as well, is horrifying to look at. David, you wanted to respond.
So even what's his name?
Who you were saying?
The comic book writer?
Kirkman.
What's his name? Kirkman, yes. Wow, I'm bad with names.
Don't worry, most people are bad with names here. I don't know why I remember these names, but no one else seems to. That's okay.
Yeah, but even Kirkman himself was like, I think I probably went a bit too far on this. But
in the comic or in the show?
The show,
okay.
The comic. You don't, honestly, I don't think there's that much there's destruction for sure.
Yeah.
Like that amount of destruction they made in the show, like they talk about it in the comic, but you don't see any of that. You know?
Right.
It's just really like a couple of panels of him crashing into the city and then you move on to the next place. But like it gets gruesome with Mark, but you don't see the gruesomeness of like the regular people in the city. So like, yeah. And I think he just kind of wanted to like amp it up because I mean that was the whole thing of the show. You know, when the title cards come out, it gets every episode you get more and more blood. So like he kind of forced himself to build up to this moment, really. But yeah, no, I mean, I you're totally right. Like the destruction of it does kind of feel like a 9/11-esque destruction and loss of life, and just, you know, there's clearly going to be. This is going to be talked about probably second season, just the sheer destruction of this. And I kind of hope they bring it up with Mark, though, too, because, like, he was front and center of this whole destruction. So I kind of hope they kind of show, like, some form of PTSD from this, you know? Because...
Oh, man, yeah.
Because kind of, like, I mean, the thing just happened and all of that, but, like, at the end of the series, he's just kind of like, oh man, that's kind of like, I hate this, and that's it. You know, it just doesn't feel like as impactful. It didn't feel like this really the destruction, I guess, impacted him. It was just more so of my dad's evil thing that kind of gets to him. But I mean, again, this was immediately afterwards, so I'm sure there'll be more of it in the second season. But yeah, when I saw that, wow, you can only get away with. I think you can only get away with that in animation. There's no way.
Well, you know what's interesting is, I don't know. I mean, I was reminded of 9/11, sure, when I was watching that, but I was also reminded of a different sequence in film that also is also resembles what happens in 9/11. That was from, well, we all know Man of Steel, where Superman and Zod are annihilating the city. And what I noticed is, like, where in that sequence in Man of Steel, it felt grossly excessive, unearned, and then also just plain awful. In this instance, it feels awful in the best way possible, right? Like, it all is serving a narrative purpose. The damage and destruction being inflicted is it's the battlefield of this emotional turmoil between Nolan and Mark, and you feel it. You feel every life lost here. Just the needless loss of life. And it's just, it reaches a point where Nolan is evil. Maybe not irredeemable, as we see later on. Maybe not completely irredeemable, in the sense that there's no sense of humanity in him. Maybe there is some. You don't see it in this instance, because all you see is complete evil. Look at all of the death. Look at all the destruction. And he's doing it because. And then it gets worse, visually speaking. When they head into the subway, oh my God. When he holds up his son as a subway car is about to crash into them. And you see it happen. You don't cut away, you see it happen. Just how the subway car completely just falls apart once it, hits the Viltrumites, because they are obviously impervious to being damaged by that.
Mhm.
But it's not just that subway car that's flying and literally flying into Mark's face, but Mark's body is being used to basically squish a bunch of people on impact, and the guts fly and the blood flies, and you're just left in shock. Honestly, like, as bad as things have been like so far, like that is the moment where things kind of begin to, wow, can this possibly get much worse? And that also in and of itself has to be just traumatic. Like, Mark's body is being used as a weapon to kill these people by his own father. What do you say to that? Like, just what do you say? And then it gets worse, right? Like, you go off into the mountain area. Oh, and just, collateral damage. A bunch of people just get buried alive because it causes an avalanche. No biggie. And then it all crystallizes as Nolan is just unloading on his son, and and they do something here where, like, you feel the sound design is perfect. You feel the weight of all of those punches, and he's just laying into Marcus as hard as he can, and you think, like, how the hell is he gonna get out of this? There's literally no one else to stop him. Like, where does the story go from here? Like, honestly, when you're thinking this, it's like, well, this is it. It's over. Omni-Man won. Mark is dying because he refuses to be, what his father wants him to be. He refuses to be a cold monster. And then, maybe in a little bit of an unexpected scenario, Nolan finds a sliver of humanity in him as a direct result of him on his time on Earth. And we get this flashback. Ooh, hits you hard. Comes at the best moment possible from a writing perspective. And you get this flashback to where Nolan is, for the first time, it seems like, somewhat understanding of what his role is supposed to be. You see Debbie in this very motherly and spousal support role where she's explaining to this alien how things are done here and why we're supposed to care about these moments, and it's a beautiful explanation. But you also see the joy that all parents get when they see their kids win a baseball game. And it's because of that flashback, and he finds that humanity left in himself to stop. He stops himself. Because it's as if he has the sudden realization, like, this is my son. Why am I doing? I'm not going to kill him, am I? Like, literally, is he asking, like, am I going to do this? And then he stops. He stops hitting him, and then he just lashes out, like, yelling at him. Like, all of his frustration, all of his disappointment, and all of his anger just being unleashed. And it's moments like these where you're very, very thankful, and you're also reminded as to how J.K. Simmons was the perfect person to take this role. And then he flies away, leaving Mark behind with what you would think is a tear in his eye. And then he just leaves. What do you think about all this?
Oh, that was a great scene. I loved it. I mean, it's kind of like those moments in, like, with the Superman. He's always trying to learn how to be human, what it means to be human and everything. And so there's a similar scene. And I kind of loved the ending of it when Omni-Man is yelling at Mark, going, like, what would you have at the end of all this?
Oh, yes. Thank you for reminding me about that. That's a great moment.
And so, I mean, that's kind of how this whole situation ends. He asks him that question, and he goes, you. I'll have you. And even Kirkman himself said, like, it's a cheesy line, but it works so well, basically. Like, it just is, there's no other way to put it, basically. Like, there's just the best line you could come up with, or the best line to say, really. And it's insane, though, too, because, like, you're seeing all this destruction, and, like, you kind of just, even I was, like, going, like, oh my gosh, there's no way Omni-Man's gonna be, like, a good guy after this. Like, what the heck? Like, kill him the next time you see him, or get strong and kill him. But again, it's just this thing again with, like, kind of being human, where it's just this belief, I guess, of Mark has this belief that his dad is still good even after all this destruction, which some people will find insane. Some people will definitely disagree with that. But that's kind of the point of being a superhero, is just this constant hope for others, even if they don't deserve it.
As Darth Vader would said once, if he can be turned, he could become a powerful ally. Or maybe that's the Emperor that said that. In referring to Luke Skywalker here. It is interesting. And then it also, I guess, does remind you why he never hurt Debbie, physically anyway.
Mm-hmm.
That there may be certain things that he can't bring himself to do. Even he can't bring himself to do. No, but that line, that's the line right there. I'll have you. I'll still have you. Ugh, Jesus Christ. Honestly, could this get any better? Gosh. And to think that this finale aired, and at that point they didn't have the news if it had been renewed or not. Ugh. God. But thankfully, we've got 2 more seasons, and hopefully many more seasons after that, because this show has definitely so much story left to go. And we're only giving glimpses here. We have a whole we're given this entire, I guess, I feel like, Alan the Alien kind of dropped the end game here, basically, about where all this is going in this intergalactic war with the Viltrumites. But we're not going there yet. That's a long way off, because we're also just reminded about all of the different threats that are still on Earth. We're seeing the Mahler twins, Titan, also the parasite invasion happening on Mars that's still to come for us. And then even somehow miraculously enough, that earthquake guy that we thought was vaporized in a volcano is now leading a legion of creatures to rise up, and it's like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I forgot about that. That's cool. I really like that montage, especially like the music playing. It was cool, and it's, I don't know, it's just, I didn't expect that scene. It really gets me excited for the show. Like, what other changes are there? But for the people who only watch the show and like they just can't wait, seriously, read the comics. Like, I know I've been saying like he makes these little changes that make the show so great, but the comic itself, it's still really good. There's some cool jokes. There's some ongoing jokes that they do. I can't say one because it's kind of a bit of a spoiler, but yeah, the comics are really great.
Some people were just some hanging threads. Donald, who was Cecil's like right-hand man at the GDA. By the way, did anybody else realize like these acronyms are getting too similar? So this is the GDA, and then with Falcon and Winter Soldier was the GRC. So it's a little confusing here and there. But like Donald, the guy with the sunglasses, basically, I noticed some people were saying like they were surprised he was killed off, since he had, I guess, more to go in the comics. You don't want to say? Okay.
I don't want to say.
Okay. All right. All right. We don't want to say. All right.
Yeah.
I don't want to say it because I guess that leads somewhere. I wonder ultimately where the GDA is going to go, because they're basically S.H.I.E.L.D. and the S.H.I.E.L.D. that was run under Nick Fury in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and we've seen that they're not above utilizing some shady tactics of their own, basically recruiting Sinclair, the scientist guy, and using his design for their own needs. And you have to wonder, did Mark not realize Cecil was using them? Is that going to come back around, where Mark is going to be a little bit upset with Cecil and the GDA?
I'm sure there's going to be a lot of things Mark is going to disapprove of with Cecil, but I mean, I know he's invincible, but there's not much he can do about it. He's in charge of this section. He's going to do what he's going to do to protect this world,
Mm-hmm.
And but also I think his excuse will be like, I mean, we have him, might as well use him, like just gain some soldiers, and like he's only using dead soldiers.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying it's right, but it's the closest thing you can do morally, right, and all that. And but also, like, how is he gonna fix Rick without the guy who made him?
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of excuses he'll still make up. Also, we didn't talk about his scene in episode 7 when he's like literally face to face with Omni-Man.
Oh yeah, I want to talk about Cecil. What a badass, man!
He's
Honestly,
such a badass,
right?
Oh my god! And like I said last week, in the comics, he comes off as a really good guy. Sometimes he can be a bit of a hard ass, but that's only because
He has
Invincible
to be.
He has to be, but also Invincible kind of fucks up every once in a while. But that scene in episode, what is it? In episode 8.
7?
No. Well, it's just a small scene in episode 8 where, this was after Omni-Man left.
Right.
And he goes up to Omni-Man's wife, and Debbie. Yes. He goes up to Debbie, and he goes, so just to kind of avoid any press with you guys, we just said that your husband died instead of saying that he's Omni-Man. And because of that, we, the government, just kind of like raised up the popularity of his books, so he'll be covered for the rest of your life, basically. Wow. And I like what he says. I like what he says. When he just goes, if I can just do one thing right today, I'm just glad it'll be this. And so, like, that scene was in the comics, and it's such a cool thing that he did. And again, this is why I thought he was such a good guy in this. But in episode 7, though, they showed him to be a badass. Oh my god!
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, he put himself in the line of fire directly with basically Devil reincarnated himself, and very nearly being killed. Like that, if it weren't for that teleporter, which, by the way, can we get a move on with creating teleportation, please? That is so cool.
Yeah. And I like the conversation that they were having. He's just kind of like, why? Like, they were your friends. I trusted you. Why? It's just like, I love that he's just facing him. He's literally facing Superman, the most powerful man.
And can walk away.
And can walk away. Yeah. It's like he only lost a tie. That's it. Oh, man. But, like, and then that moment, though, with, I think it was when Omni-Man and Invincible are fighting that kaiju monster, and he kind of had to make like the decision to just kind of like leave them and just hopefully one of them dies in that situation. And Debbie's kind of like, fuck you. And he's just like, yeah, sometimes I hate myself too.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's kind of badass because like he knows he's doing something wrong, but he's gonna do it to protect people.
Yeah.
Oh, he's
a great character. I can't wait to see more of him as we go along. Any other characters that we didn't mention or spend much time on? I can't think. I think we went through the gamut, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. That's everything.
Yeah. What a season of television. Honestly. What a season of television. What a great show. I can't. I can't believe there hasn't been more made of this in our group. Like, what the fuck are Kyle and Alexis? Like, they would love this shit. Like, wait, hello? Like, I loved fucking Winter Soldier. I really loved WandaVision. This show is perfect. That's the best way of putting it. Like, I mean, it's not, but it's as close to perfect, I think, as any of the ones that we've talked about thus far. You know, honestly, this set a very high bar. This set a very high bar for like the rest of TV is concerned for 2021. But I think we're gonna leave it there. I don't think of anything else that we can. I guess like maybe we'll come back and talk about more of the show once we listen to more interviews on Kirkman. I know he went on Kevin Smith's podcast. I really want to listen to that. Right, he went on Kevin Smith's podcast, right? Okay, yeah, I want to listen to that. And then I'm really excited for more and more people to find this show. And I we had already mentioned how there were some similarities with the Dragon Ball universe, right? I know that in one of the reaction channels, Heroes Reforged, they had mentioned that like a lot of the action in particular, it feels like you're watching Dragon Ball Z for the first time again. It feels the most reminiscent of that only because of just how visceral it is, you know, and just how big the stakes are. And I couldn't agree more. It feels exactly like that. The action in particular. By the way, did you ever see Super? Dragon Ball Super, the sequel series. Yeah. Okay, I have not, and that's on my list of shows to see. So maybe I'll have you to discuss that with when I know our friend Julio Dominguez has seen all of that because he is the anime person of our group. He's the only, that's all he watches really is anime. So if there's anything, and I think Avatar: The Last Airbender, which he considers to be anime, but we all know the long-standing debate about whether or not that is anime or not. But we're not going to get into those weeds here. But I can't wait to discuss that with you when we get there. But yeah, I don't know if I'm not sure at the moment what we're going to be talking about next week. But there'll be a show of some kind next week. And we'll see you all then. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. We so hope that our enthusiasm would lead you all, even though I think this was completely a spoiler. So, I mean, I guess we kind of ruined the show. But go watch this. Watch it again. It's an amazing series. And as always, you can listen to our podcasts anywhere you listen to podcasts, whether it be on Spotify, Apple, CastBox, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, all of the places, every single Sundays, sometimes Thursdays. And again, I want to plug another round and the Mitchells and the Machines, our reviews and the movies themselves. Go out and go see them. And coming up pretty soon next week, Peter and I are going to have reviews for The Father, which stars Anthony Hopkins, and also Promising Young Woman, which stars Carey Mulligan, also films that I'm very passionate about, and I would hope more people would see them and talk about them. I'm waiting for you guys here at Red Spotlight to watch these things. I cannot believe I'm the only person that has like gone out of his way to watch these movies. Watch them so we can talk about them. God, I'm not talking to just you, Dave. I'm talking to like Alexis and Kyle. I don't know what the hell they've been doing. Honestly, maybe I should listen to the Fantasy Fair, but like, I know that they've been busy as all hell, but like, come on, there's so much great content to watch right now. I can't believe the rich is like, if like much of 2020 felt like a dry spell. Like we were literally like digging for things to talk about. Like we talked about some old shows literally in the process of that with Airbender and Korra. But now we're kind of, we're being inundated with all of this content, and we're coming up with the Cruella film is coming up, and so is A Quiet Place Part 2. And then the summer season is finally here. We're going to get like this onslaught of all of these summer films, So all of these summer films are coming up, and so there's so much to discuss. There's so much to talk about. And at the very least, I'm very happy that I have you to at least have this discussion with, and Peter. But stay tuned for our shows here. Thank you, David, for being on this podcast. And we will see you all next time. Stay under the spotlight for more content. Bye-bye.
Bye.